मिलितं श्री गुरुवे नमः। श्री चैतन्य मनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मायं ददान्ति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरुन् श्रीयुतापतकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं स्वावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्यदेवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पादां सहगना ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितं हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपीश गोपिका कान्ता कान्ता नमोस्तुते तप्त काञ्चन गौरांगी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानं वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधारा श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा
कृष्ण कृष्ण
हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा।
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Shashwin, for the wonderful Mangalacharan. Kindly continue with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayana.
Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nastapraye Svabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Daya Vilasite Svesu Gunesu Gunavaniva Anta Pravista Bhati Vignya Dena Vijrumpita.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Shashwin, for the wonderful Mangalacharan reciter. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Please accept humble obeisances and Danvat pranams from everybody who has joined the group and who will be joining soon, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, we are praying that you are feeling better now, Prabhuji. Are you okay now?
I'm much better, Mataji. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for giving your time, Prabhuji. We are reading the Srimad Bhagavatam and we are on Canto 1 and on Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is called The Divinity and Divine Service, Prabhuji, and the text for today is text 31. We have done the Mangalacharan, Prabhuji. We've recited the shloka once, text 31 once. So shall we continue with the translation and purport and then hand over to you, Prabhuji?
Yes, please. Yeah, please do, Mataji.
While everybody then will have... So Arya Govindas, Prabhuji, may I please request you to read the text and translation? Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Arya Govindas, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yeah. Prabhuji, is it possible for you to read the text 31 and then word to word and translation, please, Prabhuji?
Okay, Mataji.
Thank you.
Taya vilashiteshvaeshu
Taya vilashiteshva eshu
guneshu gunavan iva
guneshu gunavan
antah pravishta abhati
antah pravishta abhati
vignanena vijrumbitaha.
vignanena vijumbritaha.
Word to word translation. Taya, by them.
Taya, by then.
Vilashiteshu,
Vilasiteshu,
although in the function.
although in the function.
Eshu, these.
Eshu, these.
Guneshu, the modes of material nature.
Guneshu, the modes of material nature.
Gunavan, affected by the modes.
Gunavan, affected by the modes.
Iva, as if.
Iva, as if.
Antah, within.
Antaha, within.
Pravishtaha, entered into.
Pravishtaha, entered into.
Abhati, appears to be.
Abhati, appears to be.
Vignanena, by transcendental consciousness.
Vignanena, by transcendental consciousness.
Vijrumbitaha, fully enlightened.
Vijambritaha, fully enlightened.
Translation and purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Krishna Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.
After creating the material substance, the Lord Vasudeva expands himself and enters into it. And although he is within the material modes of nature and appears to be one of the created beings, he is always fully enlightened in his transcendental position. I continue, Mataji.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Purport. The living entities are separated parts and parcels of the Lord, and the conditioned living entities who are unfit for the spiritual kingdom are tuned within the material world to enjoy matter to the fullest extent. As Paramatma and eternal friend of the living entities, the Lord, by one of his plenary portions, accompanies the living entities to guide them in their material enjoyment and to become witness to all activities. While the living entities enjoy the material conditions, the Lord maintains his transcendental position without being affected by the material atmosphere. In the Vedic literature, Shruti, it is said that there are two birds in one tree. One of them is eating the fruit of the tree, while the other is witnessing the actions. The witness is the Lord, and the fruit eater is the living entity. The fruit eater, living entity, has forgotten his real identity and is overwhelmed in the fruitive activities of the material conditions. But the Lord, Paramatma, is always full in conscious transcendental knowledge. That is the difference between the super soul and the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul, the living entity, is controlled by the laws of nature, while the Paramatma or the super soul is the controller of the material energy. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. We hand over to you now.
Hare Krishna, everyone. And thank you so much, Mataji. Thank you so much, Hare Govinda Prabhu, Shashram Prabhu, for your recitations. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Vashta Bhutale, Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namane, Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine, Nirvishesha Shunyavari Prashatya Adesha Tarine. So yeah, wonderful to be back here with you all. Before we sort of dissect this beautiful verse and wonderful analogy given by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada, as promised, last week we were discussing a little bit about Deva worship, and in particular Lord Ganesh. And a brief revisitation of last week was A very interesting question was asked. Why is Lord Ganesh considered or known as the first to be worshipped? And how should we kind of view this? And also the discussion went on, is Ganesh worship considered Karmakanda? And why do devotees still engage in this? And I wanted to get a conclusive answer for you all. So I did my research. I also approached a senior devotee and a priest, ISKCON priest as well. So we can understand that, yes, actually, generally, the worship of Lord Ganesh is considered generally karmakan. So for deriving some material benefit. But ultimately, it is whatever worship we're doing, it's what consciousness are we doing this worship with? So if some people have a particular attraction to certain devas, some people still from previous, before coming to Krishna consciousness, they may have had a certain attraction for a certain demigod, for a certain deva, a devta. That's okay if the consciousness is that, please help me to attain the favor of the one you worship, which is Krishna. But ultimately, the idea is that actually, even although Ganesh is known as the first to worship in a material sense, we're able to give up even the worship of Lord Ganesh, and devotees eventually want to worship the one who Lord Ganesh worships. Lord Ganesh worships Lord Nrsingadev, Krishna. So I hope that clarifies, but it definitely clarified for me. And so that brings us on to today's verse. Daya vileshite veshu guneshu gunavaniva anta pravista abhati vigyanena vijambitaha. After creating the material substance, the Lord Vasudev expands himself and enters into it. And although he is within the material modes of nature and appears to be one of the created beings, he is always fully enlightened in his transcendental position. So this is such a wonderful verse. And here it's clarifying the Lord's position and our position. So I wanted to talk about just three things really, is what is the Lord's position? What is our position? And what is the process to realize our position? So as is explained here nicely in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that the living entities are separated parts and parcels of the Lord. And the Lord, he's actually always with us in the form of Paramatma. So as we know that the Lord is always there, seated within our hearts, as he's not the same as us. He's not Atma. He's the word which is important is Paramatma. So the supreme. And he's there as the eternal watcher of all of our activities. And then obviously the Lord exists as Bhagwan, and his energy is Brahman. So I heard a nice analogy actually, which was given in a class, and the analogy originated from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So if you can imagine, at the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur in India, a lot of colonization was happening. The British had taken over India, and there were many, there weren't any infrastructure in India in terms of transport and railroads, and the British was really introducing that. So at that time, many Indians had never even seen a train before. And this is the understanding, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur gave a nice understanding of how people could understand the Lord. So some people, especially the impersonalist or Mayavadi conception, is, oh, the Lord is just energy. Some people, they may say, oh, the Lord, yes, he exists as energy, but also as we say, Paramatma within the heart. But the best personal understanding is the Lord, yes, he has his energy, Brahman, but there's more to him than just that. Yes, he exists as the Lord within our heart, but there's even more to him than that. He is Bhagwan, a person. And the example was nicely given that at the time, many people had never seen a train before. And so a train for the first time, people will come and see a train. And in the distance, when you can see in the dawn, a train is coming, all you can see is a huge light. So everyone came outside, and some people said, oh, I've seen the train. Oh, there, I've just seen, it's a light there. Horrible. And they went back inside. Some people stayed, and as the train came closer, they could see it was a huge metal object. So they said, oh yeah, okay. So we've seen a train, it's got a big light on it, and it's a huge metal object. Okay, we've seen it now. Time to leave. But some people stayed right until the train had pulled up, and they could see not only did it have a huge light, not only was it a huge metal object, but people were coming in and out of the train. So I understand. The train is not only, yes, it is a object with a huge light. Yes, it is a huge metal object, but it also is a vehicle which transports people from one place to the next. If you were to ask the first set of people, what is a train? They would say, oh, it's a huge light. If you were to ask the second set of people, what is a train? They'd say, oh, it's a huge light with but it's also a big hunk of metal. But if you ask the third set of people, they'd say it's a vehicle, a mode of transportation with a huge light. It's a big hunk of metal, but it takes people from one place to the other. This is the full understanding. And this is an analogy given to explain the full understanding of Brahman, Bhagavan, Paramatma. So a very, very famous analogy is given here, and it's mentioned, Prabhupada mentions this analogy throughout the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, is that of the bird, so the eternal watcher. So as we are about to do any activities, they are permitted and watched by the Paramatma, which is given as the example of us. The Atma is the bird on the tree eating the fruits, and the other bird is witnessing the actions. The other one, us being the Atma, eating the fruits, and the Paramatma is the witness as the Lord. The last time we spoke, we actually did say that, technically speaking, the Lord exists in the heart as Vishnu. Does anyone remember which Vishnu it is? So the three Vishnus we mentioned last time, does anyone remember which one it is? No. Okay, so that was the topmost universes, creating universes, Garanadakshaya Vishnu. Then the second Vishnu is known as Maha Vishnu, and the Lord seated in the heart, expanding in the heart of every living entity, is Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. So it will be mentioned throughout the Bhagavatam, and it's a good to remember this kind of technicalities. So there's so many scientific theories. There's the Big Bang theory, there's the Darwin's theory, but these are all theories of how the universe, but this, as it's coming from a bona fide source, it's coming from the Shastra. This is actually science. Now, often scientists, atheists, materialists will deride this as make-believe. But interestingly, the Big Bang theory, Darwin's theories, there's no real evidence for these. You know, these are just theory, hence why it's got the word theory at the end. It's essentially speculation. There's no definitive proof that this actually happened, yet they will cite this as science. So it's important to realize that what we're following here is actually not just speculation, not just sentimentalism, but actually what we're following here, what we're reading here in the Srimad Bhagavatam and in the Bhagavad Gita is of Vedic science. And it's a scientific process by which we follow. Sometimes people will ask me, they'll say, well, how do you know? How can I prove it to me? Can you show me God? People often say, can you show me God? And we'll talk about this a little bit later, why we can't just show people God, because I'll talk about it a little bit later in terms of our position. But so what I say to people is, well, do the experiment. If you want something, if you want to find if something works, then follow the prescribed experiment and see for yourself There's nothing like personal experience to see. Chant Hare Krishna, follow the injunctions of the scriptures, and then you will be able to see God. So it's like a scientific process. One thing I did, a question which is often come up, is it's mentioned in this verse, he is always fully enlightened and in his transcendental position, and although he appears to be one of the created beings. So we may know in Krishna's pastimes, as Krishna came here, Krishna actually was killed. He was killed by the arrow of a hunter. So my question to all of you is, if Krishna is always transcendental, always fully enlightened, how could Krishna technically be killed by an arrow? Does anyone have any thoughts on this?
It's appearance and disappearance, Prabhu. In the sense, he appears by his own will and then disappears by his own will. So there's no actually birth and death for him.
Thank you very much, Arya Govinda Prabhu, for clarifying. Yes, very much so. Panchali Mataji, did you have something to add?
Just that, Prabhuji, it's not an answer to your question directly, but just a kind of speculation. Is it because the person who killed as in killed with the quotes, killed him, did he have a karma in which he had to do this? So Krishna facilitated that by him being the subject of that karma.
Thank you very much, Mataji. So we just opened this all up here. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. So yes, Mataji. So first of all, the person who quote unquote killed Krishna, he had been killed by Lord Ramachandra, who's Krishna, in his previous life as Vali, and he'd been killed in a dishonorable way. So he'd been shot from behind with an arrow. So Lord Ramachandra had actually given him this benediction to show that his Lord's work. But like Arya Govinda probably mentioned, that if either one of us would be shot in the thigh, or sorry, not in the thigh, in the ankle with a arrow, most likely we wouldn't even die from that. What to speak of Krishna? But yet this was enough so materialists may say, oh yeah, look, see, Krishna was killed, but no, he wasn't killed. Even if we were shot in the foot with an arrow, it'd be very painful, but it wouldn't be enough to kill us. But as Arya Govinda probably nicely explained, that Krishna comes and goes with his own sweet will. So it's appearance and disappearance. And this is not a material concept there. So another one of the Lord's position is that it's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita in the 4th chapter that Krishna knows past, present, and future. He actually says to Arjun, he says, Bahu me vitanti janmatava charjana tani aham veda sarvani natam veta parantapa. Many, many births you and I have passed. I can remember them all, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. So Krishna knows everything. He remembers everything, past, present, and future. And that's his position. He knows everything. We don't. I thought there was a nice story which I read, which I wanted to share with you all about how this is nicely demonstrated. So Krishna, as you, I'm sure you all know, for some time he resided in Gujarat, in Dwarka. And so one of the names of Krishna is Dwarkadish. So in Dwarka, there was a beautiful deity of Krishna, Dwarkadish. And in that temple with Dwarkadish, there was a very, very sweet and sincere sweeper who would come and sweep the temple room day after day. And he was a devotee of the Lord. And one day the sweeper, he approached the Lord. He said, "Dear Lord, I can see that you're giving darshan to people day and night. You must be very tired." And in a very sweet way, he had this sincere prayer that, "I wish I could relieve you of your duties and give you a break, my dear Lord." Then the Lord spoke to him and said, Dwarkadish, the deity, said, "Okay, for one day we will change positions, but you must not do anything. Just give benedictions as I do and do not interfere." So like this, they switched positions, and suddenly the sweeper found him in the position of the deity Dwarkadish. That very same day, many people came to take darshan. And at one point, there was a very rich man, very, very wealthy man. And he came to take darshan of the Lord. And what this rich man did, he came, he gave a donation, and then he left his wallet. He left his wallet on the altar and left. So the man, the sweeper, as the deity, was watching this and thinking, oh, this man, he's left his wallet. Surely I must say something. But I promised Krishna, I promised Dwarkadish, I must not do anything. So he stayed quiet as the deity and watched on. Next, a very, very poor man, but very, very sincere and devoted to the Lord, came for darshan of Dwarkadish. With all that he had, the very meager earnings he just had one coin, but he gave that as a donation, and on his knees was praying to the Lord to help him with his difficult material situation. Upon opening his eyes, the poor man saw the wallet full of money, full of Lakshmi, and took it as a blessing of the Lord and thanked the Lord and took the wallet. So Dwarkadish saw this and thought, oh no, this man, he's stolen the other man's wallet. What shall I do? But I promised I'd be quiet. No, okay. So with a heavy heart, he stayed quiet and carried on giving benedictions as the deity Dwarkadish. Finally, a sailor came to take darshan of the Lord. And at which point the rich man had noticed that his wallet had been had gone, informed the authorities, and the sailor was arrested. At which point the sweeper, as the deity Dwarkadish, he couldn't stay still any longer, and he started to speak, and he explained everything to the authorities, at which point the rich man was very grateful and to know where his wallet had gone and so forth. At the end of the day, Krishna came back to the man and said, so how did it go? How was it being me for a day as the deity Dwarkadish? The sweeper man said, wow, it was tough. It was very difficult, but I managed to do one thing. And he explained what had happened with the rich man, the sailor, and the poor man. At which point Dwarkadish said, no, I told you, do not do anything. Then he explained that the rich man who'd left the wallet had actually left the wallet there for an illegal transaction. And the money was actually laundered money. So it was stolen money that the rich man had in his wallet. As for the poor man, he was a very, very sincere devotee of the Lord. And he would have used the money in a good way and for the service of the Lord. And finally, the sailor was wrongly arrested, but he would have just spent the night in jail, and then he would have been cleared. And actually that night he was due to sail out into a storm in which he would have been killed. So the Lord had arranged this to protect him. So in this way, sometimes the reason I tell this example is that when we're facing difficulties in life, and to be in the material world, to be in the material body means to face difficulties, we can often think, why Krishna? Why are you doing this to me? Why is this happening? But Krishna, we have to have the faith, especially if we're in Krishna consciousness, that Krishna knows. He knows the past, he knows the present, and he knows the future. So if we can just remind ourselves, stay in the association of devotees, even when we're facing difficulties, we can just remind ourselves of this philosophy. I remember after I got married in the middle of the pandemic, my wife and I had a very difficult time securing a place to live. So we moved in with my parents, and from there we moved to another house. That house had an awful neighbor, and we moved again to another house. That didn't work out. Then we ended up living abroad for some time as well. And I was just saying to Krishna, why are you doing this to me? It's so difficult, And then one day, I actually was reading the Bhagavad Gita. I said, Krishna knows past, present, and future. It's time, I'm just going to trust him. And at that very moment, that day, I just decided to let go, you know, karmanya evadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana, you know, the results is our duty, not to forget our prescribed duty, but we are not entitled to the fruits of our actions. So it's our duty, just do the best that we can. And that same day that that I decided to kind of let go and let Krishna handle all my problems, I got a phone call that the house that we'd desperately been trying to sell had been sold, and that we'd been acquired the house that we really wanted in a quiet, peaceful village. And that's where we live now after maybe over a year of difficulties of moving here, there, and the other. So this is just kind of, for me, it's important to see the Lord's hand in my own life and remember his position this way, because it's so important that for me anyway, that as well as reading the philosophy, I really contemplate and see how it affects in my life. And that brings the Shastra alive for me and can see how the Lord's position in my own life, so to speak. So we've established the Lord's position as Paramatma in the heart, as he sees everything, as he knows everything. And it's a Vedic science to realize him. So where do we fit in all of this? So I mentioned earlier that some people will say, well, why don't you show me God then? And we can explain to them, well, unfortunately, as a conditioned soul, we all have 4 defects. Does anyone know what those 4 defects are?
Propensity to cheat.
Yes, propensity to cheat was one. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Cheat is illusion.
Yeah, to be an illusion. Yes, thank you very much, Mataji. We've got 2 more. So I'll finish it off. So we have limited senses. So we don't even have the eyes to see God as we are, and we make mistakes. So just what I talked about earlier in the past time that I talked about is that Krishna doesn't make mistakes, but we definitely do. So it's important to trust his plan for us. We have limited senses, so we can't really see God, and it's a science to be able to see him. I can see that someone has their hand up. Does anyone, did you have a question at this time?
Sorry, Prabhu, it's just a mistake. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. No worries, Mataji. Thank you so much. And to be an illusion. So there's something I wanted to be cheated. So the cheating propensity. So we have a desire to cheat others and be cheated ourselves. There's a recommendation. So my wife and I have just started watching, and my wife has seen it before. I've never watched it. A wonderful series called Abhay Charan, which is produced by His Holiness Bhakti Charaswami. And it's such a beautiful, I'd really recommend watching it. It's available on YouTube. I've managed to get hold of all the episodes on USB. And at the beginning of the series, before Prabhupada is born, at that time in India, there were abundance, and even now to this day, there's an abundance of fake gurus. And this is the cheating propensity coming out. And many people even believe in these fake gurus because they're able to do some magic tricks or provide some benedictions, which is actually said in the Shastra that certain people can do this if they achieve certain yogic powers. So this is the tendency to want to cheat or be cheated. But as we stick to Guru Sadhu Shastra, and if a real bona fide representative of God or a real guru, we're looking for one, then this is to be identified by the Shastras. So obviously in that episode of Abhay Charan, someone was actually claiming to be God. And Prabhupada's father was explaining, no, this is definitely not this person. A person cannot be God, because every appearance of God is mentioned in the Shastras beforehand. So yeah, so our position is we have these 4 defects. We're conditioned by material nature. And at the time of our death, at the time that we leave the body, it's determined where we go at the next point. We don't come and go as we please. Well, technically, there are certain servants of Krishna who can come and go as they please. Prabhupada was one such individual, but maybe we'll learn about that a little bit later in the Bhagavatam. But can anyone tell me what is it in the Bhagavad Gita? What does it say? What determines our next birth? It's explained nicely in the Bhagavad Gita.
Our previous
Yam-
karma.
That's one. Yes, our previous karma. And anyone?
Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tvajan tante kalevaram. That means whatever we think at the time of death,
Yes, thank you.
what is our
Yeah,
mental status at the time of death?
thank you very much, Prabhuji. Yes, so yes, and the Krishna actually says in the 8th chapter, and whoever at the end of this life quits his body remembering me alone at once attains my nature. So if we can remember Krishna at the end of our life, then, and this is essentially everything that we're doing in our lives is building up to that moment, that final test, which is death. But interestingly enough, there are certain special cases where people do actually, so from Krishna comes remembrance and forgetfulness. We talked about his position. He can remember past, present, and future. And I mentioned the verse in the Bhagavad Gita where he said to Arjun, he said, I've had many, many births and I remember them all, but you, Arjun, cannot. But there's some very famous examples of where people have remembered their previous births. And one such example later in the Bhagavatam is explained is that of Bharat Maharaj. So this is a beautiful pastime later in the Bhagavatam of a great, great king called Bharat Maharaj, after which actually India is, or Bharat Varsha is named. Such an amazing king he was. And at the towards the end of his tenure as king, he gave up his kingdom to his sons, and he renounced. He took sannyasa, went to the forest to focus on connecting to the divine. And initially, he was ecstatic. You know, as explained, he had ecstatic symptoms, and whatever little he would attain living in the forest, he would offer it to the Lord. And he'd be in ecstasy with tears flowing from his eyes. So he had a very, very high level of spiritual consciousness. It said that, I believe he was at Bhav, so the second highest consciousness one could attain. But whilst living in the forest, there was one point where he came across a pregnant deer. The pregnant deer had been scared by the roar of a tiger, and in its frightened state, it gave birth to its foal in a river, and then after that passed away. So Bharat Maharaj, upon seeing this infant deer, he became compassionate towards the deer and felt, oh no, this pure foal is left without its mother. I must take care of it. But as he began to take care of the deer, as the days went by, he became forgetful and neglectful of his spiritual duties and became attached to the deer. Thus, at one point, he lost sight of the deer many, many days later and was crying out for the deer, where are you? Where are you? And in that consciousness, he left his body. So you can imagine in his next life, he was, of course, a deer. Well, something different happened in this occasion. Usually, we can't remember our past lives. I would imagine not any of us on this call can remember our past lives. But Bharat Maharaj, he could remember as a deer, and he thought to himself, oh no, what have I done? I'd almost achieved spiritual perfection, and then I fell down from my position and became attached to the deer. So he decided to renounce his life as a deer and just sat down quietly, not engaging with the other deer, so as not to engage, accrue any more karma, and left his body like that. And in his next birth, he took birth in the family of Brahmins, was known as Jadabharat. And already he was an enlightened soul, and from there he was able to go back home, back to Godhead. So the reason why I mentioned this pastime is that there are occasions where the Lord, from him come remembrance and forgetfulness, as is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. And on odd occasions, he will help us to remember. He will help people to remember what they need to remember to come closer to him. But I don't know about you, but for me, definitely, when I face difficulties in my life, I'd rather, if I was able to remember all of them clearly, it would actually be an impediment to me and actually make me very disturbed. In the same way, this is why more often than not, Krishna doesn't allow us to remember our past lives, because it can be difficult to overcome the traumas that we enjoy in one life, what to speak of several lives. So unless it's for our benefit, that he allows us to remember. So this is our position, that we have the 4 defects, that we're controlled by the modes of material nature. But the science is that if we can remember Krishna at the time of death, we'll go back to him. But dependent on our karma, as mentioned, depending on our desires, whatever we remember at the time of death, that's where we'll go. There's also the example of once there was a Brahmin and he was in the temple, and very next door, unfortunately, there was, or close by, there was a brothel where a prostitute resided. And every day the Brahmin would look at the prostitute and with disgust. Every day he would be looking on her and thinking, oh, look at what she's doing. Awful. Like, how can she do such a thing? And he was there meditating on the prostitute. But conversely, the prostitute would look at the Brahmin with great awe and reverence and saying, oh, what an amazing man. Due to my fallen condition and due to my circumstance, I've ended up in this profession. But look at this amazing devotee, look at this amazing Brahmin, and all my respects to him. Interestingly, at the end of their lives, the Brahmin took birth and became a prostitute, whereas the prostitute, because she was meditating on the Brahmin and his good qualities, she actually took birth in a family of Brahmins and became a Brahmin. So like this, it's so important that we cultivate this consciousness as we prepare for our final test, which is death. So we talked about the Lord's position and what is our position, and especially cultivating our consciousness. And finally, so how do we realize this position of ours? So I was listening to a lecture by Srila Prabhupada, and he was talking about yoga, and real yoga means to connect. And as we said and discussed in this verse, connect to Krishna within the heart. So scientists, it's even mentioned in psychology, sometimes people will mention intuition, but they'll never say where this intuition comes from. And when people are feeling a genuine intuition, that is actually Krishna, that is Paramatma within the heart speaking to them. So yoga, a very small part of yoga, and yoga doesn't really mean lots of exercises and positions just to enhance our sense gratification, essentially. Yoga, yes, yoga in terms of the physical postures can be good for our body. I practice yoga myself, but the real yoga means to connect to the Lord within. So how do we do that? Well, I know we haven't much time left, but there was a wonderful verse from, I was reading this book by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, and within this book, he mentions a verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Atmadriya priti vancha tari bala kama, Krishna driya priti cha dare premanama. So this verse means the desire to gratify one's own senses is kama, a lust, but the desire to please the senses of Lord Krishna is prem, or love. So that's real love. So it's said that real love doesn't really exist in this material world, and the closest is that of a mother and an infant to real love. But I thought this verse was really beautiful because it's explained so many times throughout the Shastras that the biggest impediment to us is karma or lust. And even when we come to Krishna consciousness, we could be doing things to satisfy our own senses. I was listening to a class on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and it's explained sometimes we, even if I'm speaking to you now, I may just be trying to say what I want to say. I'm not really saying what you need to hear. And it's important that we cultivate this consciousness to please Krishna, not to please ourselves. So as someone who is, by the grace and the kindness of the devotees, given this position to try and speak something on Bhagavatam, I've been doing some prayers that I'm able to say what you need to hear and not what I wish to say, and not satisfy my senses, and not so even within the context of Krishna consciousness, we can still be engaging in karma as opposed to prema, which is love. So this for me was a huge clue in terms of the process of finding our real position, which is that of dasosmi, servant of the servant of the servant. So often servant in the material sense, we may think that's quite a lowly position, but in the spiritual sense, it's the highest position and the one which is actually the closest to the Lord. So you can see here how the material world is almost a backwards way of the spiritual world, in the sense that the lower we are, the closer we are to Krishna. And the higher we are, or the higher we think ourselves, the further we are away from Krishna. So to cultivate this consciousness of being the servant, of trying to serve others, trying to serve the Vaishnavas, and ultimately trying to serve Krishna. And the reason that we're here is because we try to imitate the Lord's position as the controller. We may try to control people. Even when talking about Krishna consciousness, we may want to, I know I do this myself, perhaps try and control people, try and tell people what to think and not meet them where they're at, rather than think, okay, I'm not the controller here, Krishna is. Krishna, please help me just tell this person what they need to hear, or perhaps even not tell them anything, just listen to them. And that is one manifestation of that we can see for ourselves, and I've seen for myself, where I'm trying to take the Lord's position as controller and try to control others. Instead, accept our position and remember our position as a servant of the Lord. So yeah, just in summary, we said the Lord's position is Paramatma, Bhagavan, and Brahman. There's that wonderful example by Bhaktivinoda Thakur who explains these three principles. We talked a little bit about the Vedic science and the pastime of the deity Dwarkadish, and how Krishna remembers past, present, and future. Our position of the four defects of the conditioned soul, which is to we have the propensity to cheat, and we actually wish to be cheated as well. Our propensity to be an illusion, we have limited senses and we make mistakes, whereas Krishna doesn't make mistakes. And our position is such that at the time of death, if we can remember Krishna, we'll go back to him. If not, that time of death, what we remember will determine our next body. And the process of yoga and cultivating, in particular, this mood of the servant, and through that, we can become closer to Krishna. So those are just a few thoughts on this beautiful verse and purport of the Bhagavatam. I'd welcome any comments, corrections, or questions at this time. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for an excellent class. We are now open to questions and comments. I think everybody is just taking it all in and chewing it. It was a great class, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, this cheating propensity, it's very hard to go, because no matter what you do, even while in your thoughts, you are always, that propensity is there. So how, I mean, you can probably tell us by chanting, but is there any other practical way that we can help ourselves with this? We are human beings. We know we are made out of material, and that is our defect. But we have to overcome our defects. So is there any way out, or?
Yes, Mataji, yeah, thank you so much for a wonderful question. Yeah, I struggle with this myself. We all have this cheating propensity. We want to take a shortcut. We want to be cheated in one sense ourselves. We easily accept, even when we come to Krishna consciousness, sometimes we don't want to accept the words and authority of the devotee and of Krishna, but we'll accept things, as I mentioned earlier, will accept the Big Bang Theory or Darwin's theory of evolution as science, but we won't refer to what we're reading in the Bhagavatam as science. So how do we overcome this? And yes, Mataji, you mentioned, yes, chanting ultimately, but I know I'm speaking for myself, that I'm definitely not chanting Shuddhanam. So I'm definitely not chanting without offenses. So when we're not chanting purely, we can't just rely on our chanting. Krishna consciousness is not just what we do in the morning, it's a 24/7 process. It's actually said we can even serve the Lord while we sleep. So one way I've found helps in terms of, especially in particular to this cheating propensity, it's actually revealed in the Bhagavad Gita in speech in the mode of goodness. So we can't, sometimes the mind, it's almost like a child, and Krishna, Arjuna actually says to Krishna, to control the wind, it'd be easier to control the wind. But what we can do, and what is often said, is like, we won't get to Krishna by our own will, but what we can do is be sincere. And I've referred to the modes, the austerity of speech in the Bhagavad Gita. And there's 4 things which Krishna says is in the way we speak, is make sure it's pleasing, is it beneficial, truthful, and pertaining to the Vedas. So by following this, how does this help with cheating propensity? Well, even when we've made mistakes, as we all do, because it's one of our defects is to make mistakes, if we can just be honest about our mistakes, even when we are struggling in our life, rather than try and pretend that everything is okay, can we reveal in confidence, be honest? Can we be truthful about the things that we're struggling with, revealing in confidence to devotees? And can we be honest with ourselves first, be honest with Krishna, and be honest with others about our mistakes? Through that, I found within my own life that cheating propensity to goes down. And ultimately, this also helps us cultivate humility, to be humble. And this humility, pure humility, really brings us closer to Krishna. So yeah, that was something, just some thoughts that I had on that. I don't know if anyone has anything to add.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. So acknowledging that we have made a mistake, or acknowledging that, yes, I haven't been able to do my 16 rounds effectively or attentively, I think, and then surrendering to the Lord and saying that I've done this, now help us with it. So maybe.
You absolutely, Bhakti. Yes, honesty, sincerity. Someone once told me sincerity in Krishna consciousness is everything. So Krishna Krishna is ultimately the one who's going to bring us, who's going to complete our Krishna consciousness. All we have to do is be honest and be sincere, because as we said, it saw in this verse, he knows it anyway, just like a father knows when a child has been naughty. He knows when the child's done something wrong. But what the father appreciates is when the child admits what they've done wrong, and he says, okay, let me help you now. And in the same way, hopefully Krishna will help us too.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. And then you made a comment that even while sleeping we can serve Krishna. Prabhuji, throw some light on that.
Yes. While I was staying in the ashram, you won't believe it, but I actually was sleeping. I won't mention who it is, but I was sleeping next to someone, and in his sleep, he was distributing books. So he was talking to people in his sleep, and I've heard of another devotee who would chant in their sleep. But like this, yes. So even though we maybe kind of asleep, if we've depended on, just as whatever we do in this life, and the consciousness we've cultivated, that's what we'll remember at the point of death. Even what we've cultivated throughout the day, that's what we'll remember while we're sleeping. So we can even serve Krishna even by thinking of Krishna in our subconscious. That is a service to Krishna. So, and the way we do this, it's often recommended to read about the pastimes of Krishna book before we go to sleep. But also what I've been doing the entire day, in the morning, we may have been doing our sadhana. but throughout the day, have we just been engrossed about thinking about nonsense things? Or can we try and connect? Even, I know most of us will have to go to work, but can we somehow Krishnify our work in some way as well? As I mentioned, Krishna consciousness isn't just a morning practice, it's a moment-to-moment practice. So yeah, can we think, you know, I used to be very fed up sometimes with my career, and I think, no, this career allows me then to afford a home by which I can use to serve Krishna. So I'm grateful to Krishna for providing me with this job and this career, even though it's not directly, it's not like I'm working in the temple. And like this way, I try and cultivate this consciousness. So then, and then, like I said, Mataji, a practical tip is reading something, even just a small, whatever we can manage, what we have time for before we go to sleep. And then as we go to sleep, I can't say I do, but hopefully one day I'll be dreaming of Krishna and serving him even as I sleep.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Mataji, Mansiganga Mataji, Haribol.
Yeah, I'd like to add, because Kitika, you also know the person, elderly people would know. You know, Linus, that we call him the Chinese guy. Can you imagine, not once, more than once, the bhaktas, like one time I was saying, you could, even in your sleep, you should be chanting. So then David said, he put up his hand, he said, Linus is always chanting while he's, you know, in his sleep.
Wow.
And then somebody said he was passing, you know, he used to sleep in that corridor, and he's chanting Nashinga prayer.
Wow.
I'd like to tell Kamal Prabhu that brand new devotee, brand new, you know, and yet he would be chanting Hare Krishna and Nashinga prayer. I thought, my God, what's my practice of so many years, you know? Probably I'm just abusing people. But so we really don't know who's come from which platform of spiritual life. You know, when he told me, I said, oh my God, I should be very careful of trying to chastise him, you know. But it's true, people do chant in their sleep. And he said, not even in your sleep, that's it, chanting and talking, Bhagavad Gita shlokas, you know, reciting. Yeah. And Kamal Prabhu also Prabhupada recommended, right, before going to sleep, read Krishna book. So you'll get good dreams about Krishna.
Lovely to hear from you, Mansi Ganga Mataji. Thank you so much for sharing. Yes, Krishna consciousness, see, this isn't just a theory, this is a science, and this is real. And we can see this not just in the Shastra, but as we see these examples and as we associate with devotees, it brings the Shastra alive, and we can see that it's working in the lives of others and our own lives too. So thank you so much, Mansi Ganga Mataji, for sharing that.
Hare Krishna. Are there any other questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Mataji. So I just wanted to say, like, I'm new to Srimad Bhagavatam, and I find the class is really interesting and easy when Kamal Prabhu explains. So I thought today's class was really good and he explained it really well. So thank you, Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Yes, Prabhuji comes down to our level and
Yes.
therefore we understand it better. I
Yeah.
find the same. Thank you. Thank you for that comment.
Okay.
Any more comments or questions? I'll hand over to Prahlad Prabhu. Prahlad Prabhu, can you please wrap the session up?
Yes. Hare Krishna. First, I would like to thank His Grace, Kamal Panchal Prabhu, for giving us this wonderful class, as well as the assembled devotees for their contribution and participation throughout this entire session. It was a very wonderful session, Prabhu. We appreciate speakers such as yourself coming and reaching out towards us to take us away from this material platform. You know, these speakers that normally come every time to our Zoom sessions, they are always the hand that is reaching out, trying to pull us back to Godhead. So we appreciate what you're doing for us, Prabhu. I would like to request all the devotees assembled, kindly unmute yourselves and let's chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra once for His Grace Kamal Panchal Prabhu.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama,
Rama
Rama
Hare
Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa
Sindhu
Vaishnavebhyo namo
Namo
namaha.
Namaha.
Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
Grace Kamal Panchal Prabhu ki.
Hey,
Thy girlfriend.
Hare Bo.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you for the wonderful class.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Thank you all for joining in. Just to remind you again, it's 6 o'clock tomorrow at UK time. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.